Hello! After watching this video, you will know how to use the Radial Dimension component. It can be found in the Rhino tab's Annotations section. Let's get to examples. The component can be used to create and edit radial dimensions. A radial dimension will tell us the curvature of a curve on a certain point. For that purpose, you will need a plane on which the curvature will be evaluated on, a curve point. This component will use the curve closest point if the evaluation point is not on the curve. Then you need a location for the dimension and a dimension type. You can choose between a diameter and a radius. If you want, you can apply a text override. The last inputs are for editing the settings of the annotation or selecting a predefined annotation style. Let's go over the inputs now. Here are my inputs for curves and points. I use some vector operations here to create a location for my dimension. Here I have some annotation options. These are not terribly important, but I have added them for clarity. Then we have a curvature graph and some custom previews. These are only for visualization purposes. Let's see these in action. Here are some curves in a model. The curves have unique names, and I'm using the query model objects to get each curve. I also have a point, which I have highlighted here. The point is used to evaluate the closest point on a curve for the radial dimension. I have connected the point to the curve point input and the curves to the curve input. I'm using the XY plane of the model for radius evaluation. Now for the vector part. I'm using this point and the curves to evaluate the curve closest point. And I am creating a vector and adding 10,000 units to project this point into the direction of the curvature. I will turn the vector display on to visualize. Now this will change the location of my radial dimension. The point that comes out of this move operation is then connected to the dimension location input of the radial dimension component. Now if you want, you can use the dimension type input to change between diameter and radius. Query annotation styles component can be used to get the Rhino model annotation styles for the style input, but I have decided to go and used the settings inputs. Now here is nothing special, but it's good to know that you have to use the radial inputs of the dimension settings. You can also choose to add a center mark here. I think this is quite useful, so let's leave it on. Let's now go to the model. If I move this point, the radial dimension is going to move. Don't mind the curvature graph showing a little inconsistency. This is a perfect circle. So what is happening in Grasshopper is that I am querying this point, evaluating that this point here is closest to the curve, projecting this point here, evaluating the curvature of this curve at this point and displaying the value here. Now the center mark shows us where the center of the curvature is. So it doesn't matter where this point is going to be. It's not affecting the curvature of this curve. Let's change the curve. To do that, we will navigate to our query model objects input and select the curve 3D now. I also want to move this point. Now we can see the curvature here on the curve, center mark here, and the value for the curvature here. This will change as we move the point. By clicking on the radial dimension component, you can see the circle that represents the curvature. And the radius is actually the dimension from here to the point on curve that is being evaluated. And if we use the diameter input, it is the diameter of the circle. This circle will also change depending on the placement of our point. Now this might look a little confusing. Why are the radial dimension and the vector no longer aligned? This is because this curve is in 3D and this curve has curvature in other directions than just the plane that we are using for evaluation of this radial dimension. If we go back to the top view and select the 2D curve, we no longer have an issue like this, and the radius stays consistent between the vector and the radial dimension component. If you have any questions, drop a comment below. That is all for now. If you learned something, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on the next. Thank you for watching.